All right, so today we're gonna get a bit nerdy and we're gonna talk about returns. Yeah, get your head out of the gutter. Give me a break. We're gonna talk about your money, but we're specifically gonna talk about the returns that your money earns. You see, there's not just one kind of return, and this is not something they teach in school, not something they teach in college, but when we're talking about the infinite banking concepts, or money in general, because this really applies to everything, there are two that we're gonna focus on today. Number one, cumulative returns, and number two, cash on cash returns. Now, these are both different in the sense of how they are calculated and how you would use them, but at the end of the day, they're both there to show you how to grow your money. Again, where's your head going? All right, let's dive in. People get these two confused all the time. You know, they're calling me up and they're saying, hey, the cumulative return, although they don't know its cumulative return is X, and I'm sitting there saying, no, the cash on cash return is Y. So we're really gonna have to figure out which of these returns is best for your particular needs. But that's not quite as simple as it may sound, because each of those two return metrics, the way that we calculate them, really are used in completely different use cases. I'll give you an example. Most all of you have a retirement account, a 401k, an IRA, or something, right? So when you look at your 401k, what return matters? Now there's two returns. Many of you, when you get your statement, it shows your return for the year. It shows how much you made that year. Now, if it wanted to get specific, if you were putting money in over the course of that year, how much did the new money going into that retirement account earn that year? Let me even make it simpler. Let's say you had $1,000. You put $1,000 into a retirement account. At the end of the year, that $1,000 is now $1,100. What was the return? 10%, right? So what you just did is you put money in the beginning of the year, let's just say January 1st for the simplistic view, and at the end of the year, 12/31, you looked at your statement and it said you made a 10% return. Is that cumulative or cash on cash? It's both. That's why this is so complicated, because at that point you only have 1 year. So really, the return is the same, cumulative or cash on cash. And that's what I need to help you understand. Because as we go further down, year 2, year 3, year 4, the return and the metric on how we track it, cumulative or cash on cash, really makes a huge difference. So let's jump over to the whiteboard and I'm gonna show you the difference. So let's dive in. What is a cumulative return? That's the perfect starting place. So a cumulative return is the total return on your investment over a period of time. Now that return includes the initial deposit, the growth, the dividends, and the interest earned. This also includes any principal that you may have put in the beginning, but that principal is added to the gains that have accumulated. It's essentially overall performance of a policy from the beginning, factoring in both premiums paid and the growth achieved. So when you think about a cumulative return, if it's your overall performance, that would basically be sufficient if all we were doing is talking about when your money goes into the policy and earns between 5 to 6% gross, what is left? Okay, what is left after year 1, year 2, year 3? Because we're just cumulatively rolling that thing. Now that would be important if you were just using the policy, but you weren't using the infinite banking concept at all. It was just sitting in the policy, it was a storage of wealth, you were okay with that being fine because it's better than what you can get in the bank. Perfect. Cumulative return would matter here. But once we start moving money like what we teach, once loans start coming out of the policy and going over to work in different things, like maybe you start doing real estate, lending on real estate, maybe you're going to pay off credit cards, whatever it might be, maybe you're going to buy cars with your policy. Cumulative return isn't the best measure to decide how much you make, because now you're not just talking about the premiums and the interest and the dividends in the policy, you're talking about that plus whatever you make from your real estate activities, your real estate lending, for paying off your credit cards and recapturing and recycling. And if you bought cars, well, when you recapture the payment for the car, that includes interest. So that's on top of everything we just talked about. So now let's talk about what I like to refer to as cash on cash return. That is a better measure if we're going to move money year after year. Cash on cash return is a more specific metric. It only measures the return on the actual cash you put into the policy, typically focusing on annual growth based on premium payments you've made. This does not include prior premium deposits. This is just the money you put in this year, how much money that made at the end of the year. And it doesn't factor in any additional borrowed money or cumulative return. So to keep it simple, cash on cash return isolates how efficiently your policy is growing in relation to the cash that you've put in. So let's just dissect that for a second. So you put money into the policy, which then that gives you cash value in the policy. But then we lend that money out on a 12% real estate first lien mortgage. So we lend that money out, or we pay off credit cards that were 20%, or we buy a car and recapture and recycle the money. No matter what, if you're using the infinite banking concept, which is what we're talking about here, it always involves this process. We put money into the whole life. We then take loans from the insurance company so that our money stays in the whole life, earning the same return, cumulative or cash on cash. We'll get to that in a second. And then that money goes out here and earns another return. Let's just say it's a private loan at 12%. Maybe you paid off credit cards that were 20%. Maybe you pay off a car loan or buy a car that would have been 7%. And you take those payments that you were giving to the credit card or the car finance company or the interest earned on that deal, and you put it back into the policy. Let's just say you did that every year. Every year you put money into the policy, and every year you take a loan for the amount that's available in cash value out. Let me ask you a question. What return would be the proper measure for that specific use? Would it be cumulative return? No. Because we're not putting the money in the whole life and just leaving it sit there. We're moving that money. So if we're moving money, then we want to know the return we're earning on any new dollars that are put in that year. So if we do that, and I'm going to give you the math in a second, but if we do that, cash on cash would be the most appropriate measure for the return. Because if I put $10,000 into the policy this year and I take $9,000 out to pay off credit cards, how much that year did that $10,000 earn? Cash on cash. You see, we're not looking at how much did the $10,000 this year earn plus the prior 3 years going in, because the prior 3 years we put in, we've already taken that money out. We took that money out to pay for the car. We took that money out to lend on real estate. That money's already working, so the return we get on that money is the 12% or the 20 or the 7 that I talked about, not the cumulative return. You follow what I'm saying? Now what we're going to do is we're going to fast forward and we're going to look at actual policy numbers. This is just the concept, okay? The infinite banking concepts. And now what we're going to do is we're going to break down 2 examples. And I'm going to mix in a little something because I wanted this video to be even more fun than just cumulative versus cash on cash. So I'm going to sprinkle in what kind of design works best for the type of policy that you're creating. So now let's take a look at 2 policies. 2 actual policy illustrations and how the returns play out on each one. So now if you've watched my videos or other people's videos, you know that these policies are specially designed and engineered. And they're specially designed and engineered around a specific need and goal that we're going to use the policy to solve that particular problem, that particular need. So when we're doing that, the designs are always different. There is no design that is identical for a client. It is unique for that client. So in other words, if I were to look at 2 examples, somebody that wanted to put $12,000 into a policy per year, this is just an example, but they didn't want to dump in any money. And what is a dump in? Well, let's just say in the bank account, I've been saving money. And I've got that money in the bank earning 1%. I want to take that money out of the bank and I want to put it into the policy because the policy pays me a better return on that money and the policy just has better features. So that would be a dump-in. So in the first example, we're going to use no dump-in. Now, when we design these policies, we design them with the minimum death benefit for that particular policy, which what that does is that reduces the commission. So if I were to pick on 75-25, what that means is we're going to put 75% of the $12,000 into a paid-up addition rider. And then I was going to put $25,000 into the base whole life. So if you were to look at a regular off-the-shelf whole life, it is 100% base. And if you did a regular off-the-shelf whole life from an advisor or an agent, you would probably not have any cash value to use in the first 1 to 3 years. There would be hardly anything to use. But if you were to design it 75% to paid-up additions, 25% base, you would indeed have roughly around 75% available immediately in the first year. Or, like I always say, you'd have some of that money available immediately in the first 30 days. But to do this, what you've literally done is reduced your commission by about 72%, getting down into the technicality. If you want to think of it as you just reduce it by 75%, that's great. But the agent is compensated on the paid-up additions, usually anywhere between 2 and 3% for the companies we use. So that's where I'm coming up with 72%. So how many of you in your profession would be okay taking a reduction in your compensation like 72% less? You wouldn't, right? So that's why most advisors don't like designing the policies this way, because it reduces commissions significantly. Now, some of you would probably say, well, yeah, but Chris, why wouldn't you just do 90-10? Because you've heard this advertised. And we'll hit that in another video. 90-10 can be a good strategy for this type of a policy where you're just putting $12,000 in, but it's going to severely hurt the policy in the later years because you only have 10% going into the base while you've got 90% going into paid-up additions. It would be like a rocket ship that is all booster rockets and no fuselage. So when that thing gets up into orbit, the boosters fall off, there's nothing left. I've given that example several times. But I don't want to get too deep into that, and we're not going to hit 90-10, although that could be a solution over here. But now, the other example I'm going to do is I'm going to do a dump-in. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. And this is where we have done our homework. We have put the time and the energy in to figure the mathematics out. Now, I know this isn't going to sound good, but we're going to talk about a 50-50 split. 50% to paid-up additions, 50% to base. You're probably thinking you're crazy. I want you to get paid the least amount of commission, but now you're doing 50-50, which means you're getting paid commission on 50%. But that's the wrong way to look at it. 50% of what? You see, in this scenario, we're going to do a $100,000 dump-in, and we're going to put in $12,000. So see how far the difference between those? A $100,000 dump-in one time, $12,000 per year. This is basically the efficiency is in that number. When we design something with a dump-in, but somebody wants the least amount to go in each year, this is how we dial it. Now, could we do 60-40 here? Sure, but by doing 50-50, a lot of times we can get the best results. And I'm going to just show you the math. So don't beat this one up too much because I'm about to show you mathematics and returns, cumulative and cash on cash. They're going to blow your mind. But you see, this kind of defies what you thought you knew about policy design, and then I'm going to bring it back into what return works best for you. So hold on a second. Since we're so focused on growing our returns, what we got to focus on is one other kind of return, and that is how many people are liking these videos. So what I'd love to ask you to do is throw this video a like, click that button right there, subscribe, and while you're at it, you might as well click that little bell right up top, smash that bell. Ow! So let's just look at the numbers. What we've got here are the numbers right off of a policy illustration that we did. So the client's name is Bucky Doe, hypothetically, 41-year-old, and what we're doing is we're looking at guaranteed versus non-guaranteed columns. Non-guaranteed columns, the only difference between guaranteed and non-guaranteed are dividends. Now, these insurance companies that we work with have paid dividends every single year, never missing one. So the most accurate one we're going to look at is going to be the non-guaranteed cash value. So what we're really going to focus on here is we're going to focus on the difference between the 75-25, which most of you would look at and say, oh, that's the better one because less is going into the base. But then what we're also going to do is we're going to look at it, and we're going to also look at cumulative return versus cash on cash. Now, do you remember the difference between the two? Cumulative would work great as a metric for return if we were putting money into the policy, $12,000 for the first 7 years, then the 8th year, $11,878, and then every year there on out, the minimum, $3,574. So see how big of a difference there is? We go from 12 to a minimum of 3. That's very advantageous for a lot of clients because they want a big flexibility. They want to be able to put in 12 grand because that's what they told us they wanted to save, and they want the minimum to be as low as possible, so that's $3,574. If we did a 90-10, that would be even less because you'd be putting in 90% to the base. So realistically, I mean hypothetically, you'd be putting in 10% into the base, and that's what the amount you'd be able to put in after the 9th year would be. Now that would also hurt you because you'd be able to put a lot less money in. So we don't really love 90-10s here. We've used them. They can work well if you're doing a policy with no dump-in, but once you start doing a dump-in, 90-10s are out the door. I'm going to do a separate video explaining that. So let's get back to cumulative versus cash on cash. This particular design is an efficient design. We put $12,000 in the first year, and we're going to have 78.59% of that $12,000 available at the end of the first year, so $9,431. You'd have access to roughly about 90%, so maybe 8,500-ish in the first 30 days. Just trying to give you all the numbers, and these are hypothetical numbers. Yours might vary slightly from this. So you got 78%, which makes sense. We're putting 75% to the paid-up additions, so we have at least 75% we should have available, plus interest and dividends, which gets you the 78%. So hypothetically assuming that this person, their goal is to pay off debt. Let's just use that as Bucky Doe, who's this made-up person's policy, is going to use this policy to pay off debt. They're going to use the infinite banking concept of paying off debt. So that means every year we're going to take the max amount out as a loan and we're going to pay off debt, okay? So you're going to loan to pay off debt over here. So $9,431 left. The second year we put in $12,000, we now have 92%. That's $11,072. We take that out and pay off debt. The third year you put in $12,000, we have $11,689 to use, 97%. See how that projected cash on cash is going up? So we still haven't gotten to the efficiency point, and we will right here in the fourth year. Fourth year, we put $12,000 in, and this, for the first time in the fourth year, we have $12,346 that we can take out. $12,346 is more than what we put in, so we're going to call this the efficiency point. I'm going to put a big E there. What that means is every year from this point down, every dollar you put in the future, you will be able to take out more than you put in. That's the power of uninterrupted compounding interest, and one of the biggest things people like about using these specially designed whole lives. But we got to use all of that money, okay? Every year we got to use all the money to pay off debts, which is generating a second round of money that we're taking back. Because the debts we're paying off, remember, we're rolling those payments for the paid off debts back into the policy. That isn't shown in these numbers, but I just want you to understand the circle. So when we are using it for the infinite banking concept, let me ask you a question in the comment. What return would be the best metric to use for this particular use of paying debt off? Put it in the comments. Okay, those of you that said cash on cash, you would be right, because the only thing we're really caring about is the new money going in and what that new money is earning that year. So in this year, the fourth year, that new money earned 2.88%. Nothing to write home about. But in the fifth year, same thing, we put $12,000 in. We now have $13,082, and that's a 9.02% cash on cash return. The next year, a 15.53% cash on cash. In the seventh year, we put in 12 grand. We have access to take out $14,685, and our return is 22.38% cash on cash. Let's pause there. So now let's move over to cumulative return, and we're going to do that over here. But what would cumulative return be the best metric for in the sense of a need? Well, put it in the comments. If you said using this as a storage of wealth, you would be right. Putting the premiums in, never taking the money out. Remember, for cumulative, we would not take the money out. We're just going to let the money build up in the policy. We're going to let the cash value just be our forced savings and also the return that we get. So in the 7th year, how much money have we put in cumulatively? Well, $12,000 was put in from years 1 through 7. If we do 12 times 7, that's $84,000. So we had $84,000. So now how much cash value do you have in the 7th year in this policy? Right over here, projected cash value, hypothetical, remember, the dividends are not guaranteed, but they've never not paid one. So as long as they pay dividends, we would have $86,168. So $86,168 minus $84,000 means that in the 7th year, we have made $2,168 over the course of 7 years. How much of a return is that? A whopping 2.58% cumulative return. You're not going to get excited about that. You're not going to write home about that. But that's why we don't just put money in policies and leave it sit. Because in the 7th year, your cash-on-cash return was 22.38. Your cumulative return was 2.58. But let's keep going. The 10th year, what was your cumulative return? Well, first we'd have to add up all 10 years of premiums, which is $103,026. How much cash value have we built up in the policy? $118,518. So if we take the $118,518 minus the premiums we put in, $103,026, that means we've made $15,492. Divide that into the full cumulative premium, and we have a 15.04% cumulative return. Not bad, but it took us 10 years to get there. And if we go to the 15th year, did the same math, our cumulative growth was $47,445, which is a cumulative return of 39.24%. Now here's something some people do, is they take that growth, okay, the 39.24, and they divide it by 15 because they want to know what was my average. So my average cumulative return year over year. Some people ask for this. So we would divide that by 15. So that means every year you made 2.16%. So, or 2.61%. So now that doesn't seem like a lot, but compare that to another guaranteed account. Compare it to a savings account, a bank account. Over 15 years, can you get 2.61%? Some of you are thinking, well, maybe. I would say you can't because the number is about 0.42% if we do the last 10 years in a savings account. Okay, but could you do that tax-free in a bank? No, that's 2.61% tax-free. Oh, and by the way, we didn't even mention this. In the 15th year, you have a death benefit of $317,990. Can you get 2.61% as an average, tax-free, with a death benefit of $317,990 in any other guaranteed account? Probably not. So if you're looking at these policies as a storage of wealth, they still make a lot of sense. You just have to understand they're not going to be really attractive from a return standpoint in the early years, which is why we only teach the infinite banking concept, which is why the cash-on-cash return is the more appropriate metric when we're looking at moving money year over year. Now I'm going to wrap this thing up with this next slide, because now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the difference, cumulative and cash-on-cash. If we come over here to this policy, same guy, Bucky Doe, 41-year-old. But now Bucky Doe isn't just wanting to save $12,000 a year in premium deposits. Bucky Doe had $100,000 sitting over in a savings account. He saw that first example and he's like, well, man, this seems like a much better place for me to put my 100 grand, so can I just dump that money in? I only want to put it in one time and I want to put it in the first year. So we designed the policy 50-50 to allow for Bucky Doe to only put $12,000 a year in premium deposits, but to hold that $100,000 that's going to go in the first year. So that's called a dump in plus premium deposits. Now let's walk through the cash on cash. This is a very big difference. When we dump money into a policy, we have way more money to use right away, 92.45% in the first year. Why? Well, because we dumped 100 grand into the paid up additions. Now, so that means we got 103,540 to use. We take that out and we pay off debt. Because remember, Bucky Doe's goal is to pay off all of his debt. And now he's taken that 103 out. The next year he puts 12,000 in, and we hit our efficiency point in the second year. So puts 12,000 in year 2, takes out 13,652, or there on about. Okay, so he has access at the end of the second year of 13,652. Not bad. That's a 13.77% cash on cash. So let me just show you how you do cash on cash return, and then we'll do cumulative. So in this particular example, the second year we put $12,000 in. That's our premium, okay? And how much money did we have available at the end of the second year? 13,000. So we take the 13,652 minus the 12,000 we put in. So what does that give us? 1,652. Okay, that's our net growth that year. Net of commissions, net of policy service fees, and net of cost of insurance. Because in this policy, remember, we talked about the death benefit last time, we have a way bigger death benefit. 1.6 million in change in death benefit. We got a big dump in. It buys more death benefit, and we needed a bigger term rider. But down here, so we got 1,652 is what we made. Now, if we divide that into the 12,000 we put in, what you're going to get is the cash on cash return, which in year 2 would work out to be 13.77%. I just wanted to show you how to figure cash on cash return. Now see, let's just jump ahead because I want to go faster. So the third year we put 12,000 in, we can take 14 out. That's a 20% cash on cash. The next year, which would be the fourth year, 28.04. The fifth year, 36.69. The seventh year, or sixth year, 45.98. And the seventh year, 55.75% cash on cash. In other words, we put in 12,000 in the seventh year, we get to take out 18,690. So take 18,690 minus the 12,000, divide that into the premium, which is 12,000, and that will give you 55.75. Now let's pause there and let's go over to cumulative. For that person that just has the same situation, but they just want to use this as a storage of wealth. They just want to put money in the policy and let the cash value grow. 7 years in, how much money have we put in? 184,000. How much do we have? 199. So 199,643 minus 184 means in 7 years we made 15,643. Hence, an 8.5% cash on cash return. Just in case you forgot, the other policy was only 2.58%. So you can see we're doing a lot better here even 7 years in. But let's jump down to the 10th year. 10th year, how much have we put in? 216,022. How much do we have? 261,821. Subtract the 2 and you come up with 45,799. A 21.2% cumulative return. Looking a lot better. How much was it before, some of you were thinking? Because you want me to keep jumping back and forth? Great. 15.04 versus 21.2. Why? It should be less, right? Because it's a 50-50. Wrong. This is built for maximum efficiency based on the design. We put 100 grand in. That 100 grand is earning interest and dividends uninterrupted. Now, one more. 15 years. We put a 15-year premium, or 15 years of premiums in. That's 269,392. How much cash value? 387,744. Now remember, in the 15th year, we made 158.6% cash on cash. So what did we make cumulatively? Well, take the cash value minus the premium. You made 118,352, just leaving the money in the cash value growing. That's a 43.93% cumulative return. So take 43.93, divide that by the 15 years that we've been doing this, 2.93%. 2.93% average year over year. So when we look at that, let's compare. 2.9 versus 2.61, not much different, but still more. Way better than a savings account there over an average of 15 years. And we made 43.93 versus 39.24. That just shows you the mathematics behind uninterrupted compounding interest. But again, each of these returns are good in their own sense, are fine to use, depending on your needs, but we teach the infinite banking concept. Therefore, cash on cash is the best return. When we come over here and we were to compare them side by side, that would show it, but I just thought these numbers were too small. Unless any of you have a magnifying glass to come in, I didn't want to use this slide. Folks, all I want to do is show you two things. Design matters depending on your needs and goals. I showed you a 75-25 and a 50-50. I broke down the cash-on-cash return on each and the cumulative return on each. But the one big differentiator is the one that was 50-50 was only a 50-50 because we were doing a large dump in relation to a low premium deposit. So folks, if some of this stuff doesn't make sense, jump on a call with us. That's what you need to do. Watch the 90-minute video, which I'll put up in a second, and also book a call. It's so important that we understand your needs and goals, what you're trying to do with this, and once we understand that, we can build the design to be the most effective and efficient design to solve your problems. So now that we've broken down the difference between a cumulative return and a cash-on-cash return, you should now know how to apply this for your needs and goals. Because everybody's needs and goals are different, especially when it comes to the infinite banking concepts. Whether or not you're using the policy just as a storage of wealth, well, then that should be a cumulative return, but you already knew that. Or you're using the policy for the infinite banking concept to take back the banking functions in your life, which means you're moving money. Well, cash-on-cash return is probably more appropriate there. So no matter what it is you're doing, I think the most important thing is to dial in your needs and goals. And in order to do that, I can help you. By checking this video out right here, you'll learn exactly how to apply the infinite banking concepts in your life and for your needs and goals. With that being said, folks, thanks for joining me for this episode. We'll see you next time.